Ready? Test, test, test. Need anything in the way of a level check? I'll just visit here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hello, testing. We welcome you, everyone, to the news conference with our Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. We're privileged to have the Secretary with us today. He has generously allocated quite a bit of his schedule to be here, and we're thankful for his flexibility and generosity. With us today to introduce the Secretary to you is Jay Boren with Lock and Move. Jay?
Thank you, Max. We're thrilled to be here and thrilled to be new members of NAFB. So Sonny Perdue came by his knowledge of agriculture the old-fashioned way. He was born into a farming family in Bonaire, Georgia, and from childhood and through his life in business and elected office, Perdue has experienced the industry from every possible perspective. Under Secretary Perdue, the USDA is facts-based and data-driven, with decision-making mindset that is customer-focused. As the former governor of Georgia, he's a strong believer in good government who will seek solutions to problems and not lament that his agency might be faced with difficult challenges. His four guiding principles are clear: to maximize the ability of American agriculture to create jobs, sell food and fiber, and feed and clothe the world, and to prioritize customer service for the taxpayers, as well as to ensure that our food supply is safe and secure, and to maintain good stewardship of the natural resources that provide us with our miraculous bounty. In understanding that we live in a global economy where trade is of top importance, Secretary Perdue has pledged to be an unapologetic advocate for American agriculture. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Perdue.
Thank you all, and good afternoon. I've got some breaking news here this afternoon. I forgot to ask, Max, this is closed press, right? I was sitting over here with the rookies there, Evan Slack and Roddy People there, so we need to welcome them. I heard there were going to be some students here today, so we're glad you're here and to be with us. And also, Max did tell me there were some students here, and I was telling them at the FFA convention and wherever I get in front of young people, I'm exhorting them to follow your careers in ag communication. We got any students here? Where are those students from our group? Y'all stand up for just a second, because these are the future communicators here. And I do that because no longer, I think you all understand, can the agriculturalists of America, the producers, the ranchers, the foresters, and all those involved in producing that wonderful bounty sit behind the farm gate and said, I'm doing a good job. We got the story to tell, and if we don't tell it, as you know, other people will, and some are telling it wrong. So that's very important. Obviously, this is a major profession for us, and increasingly important going forward as we tell the wonderful story about American agriculture. I love, people ask me sometimes, how do you like D.C.? And I said, well, that's the wrong question. I love the job. And I'd probably love it more if I could do it from Georgia. But nonetheless, I do. It's an awesome opportunity from a farm background, diversified row crop, dairy farm in middle Georgia, graduate veterinarian, agribusiness career. It's kind of the culmination there. When I was elected governor in 2002, the press asked me, they said, well, what does a farm kid in Bonaire, veterinarian, and agribusiness guy know about being governor? I said, well, you got to have the tools, and I got them. I already got the boots, the glove, and the shovel. So and we used all of them in that job. So nonetheless, it's a great opportunity, and we've got a great story to tell. All the way from the day of my confirmation, or the day leading up, those 100 days leading up to my confirmation, as I visited with senators around the country, as I visited with different groups, really three things came to mind. I think they're still there. And we'll talk about, I'm sure you'll want to talk about some of them today, but certainly at the top of the list was trade. Right behind it was farm labor, and then regulations impeding our productive capacity. So I think those are all things that we are still working on aggressively. I'm glad to have Ted McKinney as Undersecretary for Trade. As you remember, the 14 Farm Bill suggested that we create a mission area dealing with foreign agricultural service and trade. We did that, and I think it's ever so important as we get out here around the world selling the benefits of American agriculture and American products. For young people in the communication aspect, I was in UK a few weeks ago, and they have a tendency to disparage some of our products. So as far as safety in the United States, so one of those is they like to complain that our chicken is bathed and washed in chlorine. And while that's not a process that's used much anymore, I listened for a while and I said, well, there's no reason, it's not in either of our best interests to start a food war over food safety. And by the way, can I ask you a question? They said, sure. I said, what do you all wash your salads in? They said, chlorine. So that's the kind of story you have to refute all around the world. And my job is part communication as well. And that's why I'm glad to be here with Learn From You professionals and to have your voice leveraged out across the country. I enjoy the interviews with you and the communication with you as you reach those people who trust in you and believe in you across the hinterlands. And what I found is, I know you know your demographics better than I do, but they're not all farmers. You have a lot of people who are not on the farm, but listen to that trusted voice of agriculture that they want to rely on. So I appreciate the partnership that we can have. I want to be available to you all for the future in order to tell that story, because telling the story of American agriculture really is what you do, but it's also what we hope to do at USDA, not only here in this country, but around the world, about the benefits of the safe, nutritious, healthy, tasty food that we have all the way up and down the line. So it's good to be with you today. I told Orrin, I think you guys are the professionals, and you want to talk about what you want to talk about rather than hear what I want to talk about. But we're going to let you have a chance to ask any question you like today, and I look forward to responding as candidly as I can. Okay? Thank you all.
First of all, I'm struck by the fact that as we're here just ahead of Veterans Day and the very glory behind you, you are a veteran, are you not?
I am a veteran, yes.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We have several in our audience and in our membership. Veterans of the military, would you please stand? I want to recognize you. General America.
I think some of you people covered our ceremony in the Whitten patio yesterday, where we saluted our veterans and announced a new Veterans to Agriculture program as well. So it was a great new website. We were very serious about supporting our veterans. They bring skill sets that we think work very well back in agriculture, all the way from production to processing. And so we're really reaching out to those men and women who've served our country to give them an opportunity to further serve our country through producing that food supply.
Some of you have served more than once. Former Secretary Block here, who served with President Reagan, of course, is a military man as well. We thank you all for your service. We'll go to some questions momentarily. I have one or two I wanted to ask you. It's a beginning.
As MC, you get the priority,
right? We got confirmation this morning, of course, of a huge, even larger corn crop for the nation. That yield just keeps on climbing, I guess. It reminds us that we have to find a home for it all. How are we doing on that trade story? And as you know, farmers remain quite concerned about the trade agreements and getting agreements in place to continue going forward.
Well, certainly. Obviously, the abundance continues as we look at the genetics, continue on these step increases in corn and soybeans as well. That means that we do have to find homes for it. And we're actively out here looking. Certainly, one of the goals is to preserve the homes that we have already. And that means NAFTA. Obviously, the people in this room and the producers around the country know how important NAFTA has been to American agriculture. I can assure you the administration knows how important agriculture and NAFTA has been to agriculture, and we're continuing negotiating. I think there's probably some room for some anxiety. Of course, farmers don't need a lot to be anxious about, but room for anxiety when we see some of the proclamations coming out. But at the end of the day, I think we will get an agreement. I think the president is a tough negotiator. It may go to the brink, but I believe we will get a new and actually a better agreement over NAFTA, particularly from the Canadian side for poultry, dairy, eggs, those kind of things, but even with our southern neighbors in Mexico.
Have we done any damage to these long-term relationships with all the discussions and the rhetoric that we've all been taking place?
No, I don't think. I think it's really at the end of the day that these negotiations are tough as it is, and President Trump brings a different type of negotiator to the table. Ambassador Lighthizer works for him and has to listen to the president as the way he wants things done. So the president grew up in the real estate market in New York, and that's tough negotiation. Obviously, if you've read his book, The Art of the Deal, and he's made a statement publicly that he doesn't think you can get the best deal if you're not willing to walk away. And I think that covers some of the strategy there. But I think at the end of the day, I know that he knows how important agriculture, NAFTA is to agriculture. He knows how important the agricultural economy is to the U.S. economy. He's obviously very focused on the trade deficit, and that's originated particularly with auto and auto parts coming from Mexico. But at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that we will get a NAFTA version 2 that's even better than the first.
You mentioned Ted McKinney. Here we are a year after the election. We still don't see your whole team in place. What's going to happen?
I could take off. I'm wearing a Free Bill Northey T-shirt under here. We've got some great people the president has appointed, and we're happy to have a couple of them on board. Steve Sinsky, who many of you know here, led the American Soybean Association for over 20 years. And Ted McKinney, as you mentioned, is our first Undersecretary of Trade, having a great corporate career as well as Director of Agriculture in Indiana. And then Greg Eibach, who just joined us a week or so ago as our Undersecretary for MRP. Comes with a lot of knowledge, branding and marketing and those kind of things. Obviously, we got a big job with our Farm Service Agency and our Conservation RCS, and we need Bill there very quickly. We've got other names that should be coming out very soon, certainly on the other industries of food safety and forestry and the rest. So we hope that'll be done. It'll be a shame if we go a year and don't have a team in place by the inauguration day of this next year.
Well, let's take some questions from our members. I see my longtime colleague, Mr. Samuelson, back here. 40 years we worked together. Let's get a microphone over
I
here.
missed that rookie back there.
Yeah. I just want to make sure you knew that he was here.
I didn't see him there.
I'm back here, Mr. Secretary.
Have you told everybody my new name for you?
Yes.
The Harry Carey of Farm Broadcasting.
That's a compliment. Thank
Yes,
you.
it is.
In light of trade agreements, do you think the future of agricultural trade agreements will be bilateral rather than multilateral?
I think certainly during this administration they will. The president has specifically noted that. He believes that he can negotiate better one-on-one than as a group, such as TPP or TTIP in that area. And I think, but I also think these other countries, frankly, are looking at our progress on NAFTA and seeing how the Canadian and Mexico agreement works in order to engage with us. I'm pretty frustrated about the EU. I was pretty candid with them when I was there a few weeks ago. Excuse me, regarding their protectionism. They hide behind a lot of things, food safety, engineering, GMOs, and all those kind of things, but it's nothing more than a clouded protectionism for the EU. And that's particularly frustrating when their ministers, as Secretary Block knows, will come and, speak the right language and want to do deals individually, and yet they run back under the umbrella of the EU. It's very frustrating. So we talk candidly about that. We've negotiated very, very hard with China. I frankly don't think China has done many of the things they've committed to do. We were successful in getting beef back in this summer, but that had been a long time coming as well. We've got poultry out there. They've done their audits and all that, I think we've got to become, really like President Trump says. I think that's what he's saying, pretty direct. And we've kind of been the global patsy when it comes to trade over some things over enforcement. So I don't think it'll be a detriment on the rhetoric. And I think ultimately when we get NAFTA done, I think you'll see some other countries come in. The president is in China today on this really Indo-Pacific area. There are a lot of hungry mouths over there, aside from China, in Indonesia and Vietnam and Malaysia, and those kind of countries, and we're making a big push in the Indo-Pacific region where he is this week.
Let's go back here to Bob Bosold, one of our good members, Western Wisconsin, serves dairy country, Mr. Secretary.
And I guess I will tell you where my question is going to be focused, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. Kind of a two-part question. As far as the dairy supply management program in Canada, how hard is that going to be to get negotiated out, if not impossible, based on the fact that Canadians go back to the original negotiation, say, well, you didn't make us do it in the original NAFTA agreement, so it's going to be impossible almost to get that out of there. Second question, Canada has initiated this Class 7 pricing program, and they've literally upset the apple cart all over the world as far as dairy, but especially here in the United States. What are you doing at USDA negotiating with the Canadians to get that taken off the books? Are they in any way, shape, or form going to talk about that with you, or what can we tell our dairy farmers about Class 7 that has disrupted this market so badly?
Well, first of all, you know that our statutory negotiators, the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Lighthizer, and that is on the table. It's on the table specifically with not only milk and dairy, eggs, and poultry as well. Your second part of your question would answer the first part. They hadn't done this manipulative Class 7 milk when we did the original NAFTA. And I think that's an absolute circumvention of the agreement. It's using a supply management system with quota and very high prices for their consumers to let them overproduce and then push the solids off on the world market. And that's just not right. And we will challenge them on that. And I don't know how, whether politically they can erode or move away from the supply management system they have now. And I told the Minister McCauley there, I said, you know, I don't necessarily need for you to remove your supply management system, but if you're going to have one, manage the supply so it doesn't depress world prices from solids, not only affecting us, but many other countries. And that's what I would expect. So there've got to be some changes in order to resolve the dairy issue with Canada. It wasn't just the 75 Wisconsin farmers, but it's been depressing world milk solid prices overall for other countries as well.
Let's go back over to the left over here. Jason, you have someone over there? Please identify yourself as you stand up.
Mr. Secretary, Don Molino with the Voice of Louisiana Agriculture Radio Network. First of all, greetings from our Commissioner of Agriculture, Dr. Mike Strain. He says very nice things about you.
Yeah.
Two-part
Dr.
question.
Strain are tight.
No comment. Will the Trump administration push to keep the American sugar program intact? And second of all, will you push to get a cotton safety net program in the new farm bill?
I think, again, sugar probably has not been first and foremost in the NAFTA negotiations. It's also stood aside. I think, frankly, that Secretary Ross and our sugar negotiators did a very good job this past year with the parameters on Mexican sugar that some of our producers and processors have felt like were being dumped on the U.S. So I think the constraints that we got on the sugar negotiation this spring were very, very helpful. For the most part, both our beet growers and our cane producers are happy after the fact. You know, they're never happy, Secretary Block, until you do the deal, but after that, they say good job. But for the most part, the beet and the cane producers felt like it was a good deal on sugar. I don't think that will be a real issue in NAFTA negotiations. Second question was regarding, what was the second part?
Cotton safety net.
Yeah, safety net with cotton, yeah. I think the Cotton Council and really the cotton producers are very interested in getting back in Title I. As you all know, after the WTO adjudication that went against cotton prior to the 14 Farm Bill, they were the ones that said, don't want to stick a finger back in Brazil's eye, don't put us in Title I and let us try these other programs. Sadly, they've not turned out with the STAX program as successful as they had hoped. So I think you will see the committees, both on the House and the Senate, look to get cotton back in Title I, whether that means a separation of the lint and the seed as they're asking. That can get fairly expensive, but we are convinced they hit us up with that early on, and my general counsel really concurred with previous opinions that USDA Secretary did not have the statutory authority to make that decision of separating those two commodities in the lint and the seed. Same thing with dairy to some degree. Senator Stabenow was very anxious in us doing that for dairy with the cows and the milk. And while there probably will be a crop insurance program that deals with that, we didn't have the statutory authority to determine that as well. We're working on currently. We are working on another version of a cost gen sharing program this year, similar to what happened last year. Hopefully, bridge us over into the 18th Farm Bill, where the cotton issue can be, I think, corrected.
Mr. Hoffman, Dustin Hoffman from Minnesota.
Yes, Mr. Secretary. Just a couple weeks ago, USDA authorized some emergency funding to help farmers and ranchers in Minnesota to help combat the gray wolf problem up in northern Minnesota. And I know a lot of people are wondering, I know it's going to take congressional action to get the wolf delisted, but is there any more USDA can do to help support those initiatives to help the farmers? I mean, the funding is great and it's well appreciated, but it seems like they're fighting a losing battle against the wolf and the EPA right now.
My understanding is that we're doing virtually everything we can from the administrative perspective. In fact, I'm telling the group out here in the booth that one of the groups that I was probably less familiar with was our Wildlife Services group, and they've got more accolades as I've gone across the country from Montana to Minnesota to Wisconsin over their efforts in the predator control. You know that we've got some challenges with the accident on the M44s, and we constrained that to some degree. Many people, producers, feel like that was a huge disadvantage, particularly in more populous areas where they don't feel they can use them legally now, and the coyote population there. We know wolves are a totally different situation as well, but our Wildlife Services crowd is very popular. They're doing a good job, and from coyotes and other predation around the world. We were talking with the sheep and wool growers here as well about what a great job and what a good relationship they have. So I think we're doing everything we can now. Good luck on Congress on the wolf issue. Many people, it's that mythical thing, and they don't understand how ravaging wolves can be in a livestock population.
Another of our members who's reported on that quite often is Taylor Brown from Montana back here. Taylor, do you have the mic?
Thank you very much.
Tell us the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. It was a treat to have you in Montana for a couple of days in Great Falls in June. And some of those same guys you spent time with on those ranches are in China today. And that announcement that came out this week, several $100 million worth of beef to be sold to China. Have you had a chance to put that in perspective yet? Think what that exactly means. Was that what you were hoping for last June and the trips you made over there? And put that in perspective for us.
Well, it is. I kind of teased Greg Ibach that you Montana guys weren't letting Nebraska get ahead of them with branded Montana beef. So I think that's exactly what we're hoping. I think there's more opportunity online, maybe some smaller scale type of small branding type of things. The Chinese, the people love U.S. products. They feel that they're convinced it's very safe. It's about getting past governmental regulations, but I think really what we're going to see happen with electronic commerce, e-commerce, is that more and more smaller packers, producers of different processors of different products are going to find a global market through e-commerce, Alibaba, Amazon, and others worldwide, where they can ship their products. We've got to do it on that kind of scale, maybe than the major types of commodity movements that we've seen in the past. But congratulations to your Montana guys. That takes a lot of effort and a lot of moxie to do that.
Back against the wall at the very back is Greg Akagi.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us today as well. My question to you is, have you spoke with Commerce Secretary Ross based on the reported comments that he made, if there is a pullout of NAFTA and the concerns of how much it would affect American agriculture, that he had labeled that as an empty threat?
Yeah, he said to tell y'all he was sorry. Every trade meeting we have, which is almost every week in the White House, he hears that message, and I think it's sinking in.
There you go. Alan Watts, I think you have the microphone from Kentucky.
Yes, sir. Alan Watts from WKDZ, WHL in Western Kentucky. Secretary, great to have you with us today. Thank you for all your work. And question, I know you've probably heard some from Congressman James Comer, Senator McConnell, Senator Paul about nitrosone or nicotine, and it's a hard word to pronounce, but obviously dark fire tobacco is big for us in Western Kentucky, and some regulations were put in place have been into the Obama administration that's pretty detrimental to that. Do you see that some change on that, and what other regulations do you see being lifted that may help farmers as well?
I hear a lot from that same crowd about hemp as well. So, and Kentucky's kind of and the leader McConnell was leading the effort in the hemp production. We'll see how that goes. But there seems to be a large market for it. But certainly on this other, I'm not up to speed as I need to be about that regulation. But I will tell you the regulations generally. I know there were a lot of things that kind of put forth at the end of the last administration that we're looking very closely at, and we submitted several. I won't use a number. We submitted several regulations. This administration, one of its real tenets is deregulation. We feel like regulation after regulation after regulation is kind of peeled up like an onion and as a blanket over U.S. productivity, not just agriculture, but in many things. And the president's committed to peel them back one at a time. He had the executive order over for every one you put in, you had to remove two. We submitted several. Obviously, I didn't know this, Secretary Block, but it's as hard to get a regulation undone in Congress as to get one get done. So it has to go with OMB, and they go through all their calculations over the benefits and other things. But we expect to have several in this fall agenda of regulations that we think are harmful and not helpful to agriculture to remove. And I'll try to get more information on the specific one you asked that I'm not that familiar with.
Mr. Secretary, we have a scholarship program through our NAFB Foundation to encourage young communicators, and one of our scholarship winners is standing there, Delaney Howe from Iowa.
Hi, Mr. Perdue. Can you shed some light on the recent H-2C visa program and where that sits in Congress today? Are we making any movements to getting an efficient labor system put in place?
Congratulations. I think it's one of the best questions we've had thus far. As I told you, trade, labor, and regulation was really what we hear about. And we're working on that every day. You may know, and if you're keeping up with it, Chairman Goodlatte of the Judiciary Committee in the House introduced the bill. Frankly, it was much better in his first draft. Then it got eroded away based on his committee. Afterwards, it's going to be a tough sled with all the DACA conversation, everything else. But I can tell you this, I'm persuaded that the president understands that we need a legal ag workforce in America. And he also understands we're going to be able to either import our workers or import our food in that kind of, from dairy and harvesting and everything else. The H-2A program has been very cumbersome and very problematic in a lot of areas. I was in California on the weekend, particularly there. The sad part about the Goodlatte bill that got taken out was the transition for those workers that have been in place for a while. If they made no provision for them, that's a problem. We hope when it goes to the Senate, it can get wrapped up into a comprehensive program that would really be beneficial to farmers. Right now, farmers are fairly ambivalent about the rules or about the situation of H-2C as came out of committee. But frankly, the chairman understood in his committee he had to bail some things in order to get it out of the committee. That's the way the process works. I'm hoping that, and I had worked in the White House to get, I think, the White House on board with many of those provisions. Most people don't think the cap is realistic, but it's a start and toward a legal workforce. I think that's a good thing. So Chairman Goodlatte's committed. He's got a very difficult committee and got the bill there. Hopefully get it on the House floor have some amendments and get to the Senate and do some things there to get a legal workforce. I have a young lady, a female lawyer from Nebraska, who we got from Farm Bureau, has been working in this area. She's working on that day by day, with the members of Congress and all the stakeholders there too. So I'm very hopeful. That's very, very important for not only the dairy industry that H2A doesn't work for, but many others of the smaller producers where it's just you need to hire an HR person for 10 or 15 people, and that just doesn't compute.
Mr. Secretary, I'm guessing because of his beat, you get to see quite a bit of Spencer Chase, one of our board members from AgriPulse Communications. Spencer?
Mr. Secretary, appreciate you being here. I have a question regarding some staffing at the Department of Agriculture. We saw earlier this week there was more testimony linking Sam Clovis to the Russia investigation. I know you stood by him in the past. He has withdrawn his nomination for chief scientist, but continues to be an employee as an advisor of yours. Wondering, what is the future for Sam Clovis's employment at the Department of Agriculture?
Well, we think the future is bright. We've not identified that. I'm disappointed, obviously, that Sam felt the need to withdraw. I think he was qualified. He was frankly disparaged. It was a political target in many ways, and decided courageously, I think, that he didn't want to drag the president by virtue of his nomination and to continue this whole Russia fabrication collusion that he had been associated with. So I think he made a courageous, selfless decision. I think Sam has contributed to the USDA since he's been there early on in the beachhead team, and we think there are appropriate places where he can continue to be helpful. He understands the issues and understands the challenges, understands many of the people and knows many of the people, and many of the people trust Sam Clovis, and we hope to find the right place for him.
We have a young lady right here on the second row, Mr. Secretary.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jessica Weston, and I'm a freshman at the University of Arkansas. And in my home state, we're known for rice. That's our big commodity that we produce. And in late April, we had a lot of floods that destroyed a lot of acreage in rice production. I was wondering, how is NAFTA going to help our rice farmers? How are they going to benefit?
Well, obviously, what we have to do is get some of the barriers out for rice. Rice has not been as in Korea and other places where they eat a lot of rice. But rice does very well in Mexico, and we hope to continue. I know people mention Cuba as well as a home for rice. I was happened to come to your state immediately after the floods and saw the vast number, almost 1 million acres of rice underwater. The interesting thing about that was that farmers are some of the most resilient people I know. They recover. You may have heard at that time there are also some issues we got with our crop insurance program, replanting, and we hope to address those this spring. But I'm hoping again that NAFTA is renegotiated. I think rice will be a part of that, but we've got a lot of other opportunities worldwide where we want to promote rice, and that's in the Asian countries. We think a lot of those mouths over there would love those grains of rice.
Mr. Dowling, I think you have the microphone, sir.
Mr. Secretary, Jeff Dowling with the Cromwell Ag Network. You've been our champion on trade and our champion in NAFTA. And saw a report yesterday suggesting that you wanted to develop a contingency plan with the Congress in case it failed. Should we read that as a red flag or a white flag?
No, I probably misspoke a little bit. I was probably thinking out loud. I'm kind of a Boy Scout. I want to be prepared. And obviously, I've told you before several times here today, I think we'll have a successful NAFTA negotiation. But I'm the kind of guy that likes Plan B. And that was really my considerations. And I'm willing to approach people that I think can make a difference in that regard. And, what if? Those kind of things. We know that, we all know in this room that if NAFTA was not successful, then it's going to be pretty damaging to our commodities, already low commodity prices. So I like to be prepared. And that was my thinking out loud. Probably was a little premature to get out ahead with you guys with microphones. But anyway, I'm just trying to think ahead and prepare.
Young man, please identify yourself and direct a question to the Secretary.
How are you doing? Stephen Roth here from the Irish Farmers Journal. Hello, Mr. Secretary. everybody back home is watching very closely the Brexit negotiations. It's going to affect Ireland massively. In the past, your administration indicated that they would be open for a trade deal of some kind between Britain and between the US. Can you give me an update of what's happening here, and indeed if it's going to happen?
Yeah, it's premature. Obviously, you know that the UK has a lot of challenges right now with Brexit, and they've got in their negotiations with EU is more serious right now of how they negotiate those that exit than they can focus on negotiations with us. But I was over there laying the groundwork and to say I think we have more in common than we have differences. And obviously, I found the UK citizens or the leadership more concerned about how they would relate to the EU rules than they would to our rules. So there are challenges right now. It's premature. I was fascinated. I mentioned the chlorine issue earlier. I was fascinated to hear Liam Fox the other day, the UK trade representative, talk about the very same thing I talked about, is that if science declares it safe, they're going to communicate it safe. And it's exactly what I told them. Let the consumer make the final choice. Don't put barriers in here. Put a transparent label over there of how this process works, and consumers are smart enough to make that choice. Don't try to lead and guide them by protectionist rhetoric that disparages someone else's food safety. And so I think we'll have a great relationship with the UK, and I think it'll be even more robust than it has been. I mentioned the frustration with the EU. I think many of these nations, frankly, bilaterally, we could do very well with. And yet there's this EU umbrella that prevents a lot of that. And I frankly blame the EU construct and that old governance there being able to speak on one side one time and go back and hide under that EU umbrella the other time.
We have some great long-time farm service stations represented here among our membership, Mr. Secretary, including WOWO, Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes, sir.
I think I speak for everybody when I say we're proud of you, and we appreciate your candor and your accessibility. So thank you for that. Talk to us, because I think you make such a great point about education and educating the public out there. Kind of concerned about the education process with Congress, with the Farm Bill coming up, and wondering what your strategy is for getting some of those people on the Hill to know a little bit more about the Farm Bill before we get into that.
Well, I think I deal mostly with the committees now. I met with the whole Republican conference yesterday, and it was a good opportunity just to talk about many of these issues and allow them to relay constituent issues. But it is an education process. I think the good news, I've been quoted as saying, I think the 18 Farm Bill will be more evolutionary than revolutionary. The 14 Farm Bill and moving away from direct payments and those kind of things was a good step. The safety net is the real key for food security. We've got to have a safety net out here for producers, where producers look at market signals and produce for the market, not for farm programs. And that means a real balance here. And you got so many more crops and insurance, using insurance as the basis of that safety net. I heard this analogy. This is not original with me, but it makes sense. It says the safety net in the farm program needs to be like when you go to the circus and you go to a high wire act in the trapeze. You don't want the net right under the wire where if they fall, there's no thrill. I mean, after all, why don't people go to NASCAR races? But you don't want it on the concrete floor either, because people can really get hurt down there. So what's the right balance there? And that will require education. But I think the two committees, I think, are fairly informed. I've been very impressed with the level of their knowledge on some of the intricacies of the Farm Bill and insurance and ARC and all the PLC and all those kind of payments. They are pretty well informed about it. Now, that still requires you got probably another 400 in the House you got to educate, and probably 75 on the Senate side. So it does require good, transparent, honest communication. You all play a huge role in that. But that's what I consider my job to be. I don't write the Farm Bill, but we're there, as Secretary Block knows, to to guide and instruct and consult and give our opinion about if we think they're on the right track or not. And that's why I've been out in more than 30 states in 6 months, listening to people, what's working, what's not, and how can we do better. I'm a continuous improvement guy. I think we made a lot of improvements in 2014. We didn't nail it right in the middle, and we won in 18, but it's a matter of continuing to move the needle toward a good balance of market signals versus safety net. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. Sarah Wyatt with AgriPulse. I'm glad to hear that you have a free Bill Northey t-shirt. And my question has to do with what is the actual strategy to get that done? Not only is Senator Cruz holding up Bill Northey, but you've got Senator Flake holding up Greg Dowd for USTR. So you've got some key positions both within USDA and USTR that are being held up by your fellow Republicans. And what is going to be the path forward to get that undone?
That is a very good question. Obviously, my role in the administration is somewhat limited in the branches of government in that regard. I'll talk to you privately and tell you what I think about it. I have to be more discreet publicly about that. I just think it's a shame in our administration that we have no objection to the individual, but because of issues totally different from that, that we can have this type of thing happen. Zell Miller, a former governor of Georgia and a former senator, wrote a book about, after he got out of office, he called The Fuzzy Math of the Senate. He said where 1 is more than 99 and 41 are more than 59. And that's kind of what we have in that situation. I know that there's a lot of tradition in the Senate for this blue slipping people for issues that don't have anything to do with them. I don't agree with, and I can't tell you what a strategy would be other than appealing to the conscience of our Senate leadership and those individual members to say, go deal with the issue forthrightly. If you got an issue with the president, if you got an issue over policy, fight that policy out in the well of the Senate, but not by withholding people who have nothing to do with the issue that you're concerned about.
We have time, I believe, for one more question. Please identify yourself.
Carol Hart, Red River Farm Radio Network, based in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Thank you for taking my question. And I'm actually piggybacking off of Sarah's question. I wanted to know what kind of an impact this holdup has on USDA in case we get a farm bill passed early on in the first quarter of next year. And in addition to that, with Dowd's holdup, how does agriculture successfully negotiate or renegotiate trade agreements when you don't have, I mean, obviously we've heard from several people today in Trade Talk, you, Secretary Perdue, are a champion for agriculture, but I haven't heard many other people mention others in the administration who are. So if you don't have someone else on your team, how do you successfully negotiate something like that? So sorry for the two-part long question.
I'll start with the second one first, and you can tell me what the first one was. We had some of our people back here with FAS, Jeff Halfmeister, who is with FAS, and we typically work in a consulting relationship with our USTR, and we've got people embedded over there as expert consultants there. Obviously, Greg would be a huge part of that, leading their team of ag consultants in USTR. They have the statutory authority. We're kind of the sales force out here, seeing where the opportunities are. But there are some challenges that we need to work through. I have, if y'all think I'm candid today, I had some really candid discussions with Bob Lighthizer over trade and agricultural's input and need to be included in those trade negotiations. I think we're making progress. You won't go anywhere in the West Wing and people say, agriculture is not important. They know it is, and we have to continue to make that point. And I think the president knows it is, and we will continue. Bill Northey obviously is very important. God help us if he's not on board by January, for heaven's sake. We hope to get that done. I will probably go and make direct appeals to the leadership of the Senate if it goes on that long. We're trying to be respectful, but there's a limit to that. But we have announced our state directors for FSA and RD. Those were too long in coming as well, but we've got those in place now. I think we've got some directed leadership from our culture and our strategy out here in doing that. We've also got great acting career staff at FSA and FPAC is what we're calling it, the food production and conservation there, that I think our customers are going to be served. We've tried to bring teams up into Montana and the Dakotas where we had the drought and had the extra people needed for sign up on emergency. So we're trying to do the best we can, but obviously we wouldn't have these undersecretaries if we didn't need good leadership, and we need them, and we need them sooner than we got them right now. It's 9 or 9.5 months after this administration came on board. I never had any idea that would be the case. There's probably enough culpability to go around everywhere, so we're going to continue to do what we have. I tell you what, I'm really proud of the ragtag group we got now. I won't call them ragtag because there's some dedicated career people that are just going forward and doing a great job for America. So while we need this leadership, and I'm happy to have Greg Eibach, Ed McKinney, Steve Sinsky there, we need their counterparts in the other mission areas to really get it done. But I want to tell you, the careers have really stepped up and done an amazing job, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud to work alongside them.
I think you can tell by the nature of our members' questions why they're highly regarded in the agriculture communities that we serve out there across the country. We all want you to know how appreciative we are that you've set aside your time. You get pulled in a lot of different directions. There are many places you could have gone today, and it means so much that you spent all this time with us, Mr. Secretary. Please join me in thanking Secretary.